Welcome to the place where we learn about improv, 'cause public speaking can take you so far. Improv speaking, say yes and flex your creative thinking. Improv speaking, say yes and flex your creative thinking.
All right, and welcome everyone to the Improv Speaking podcast. I'm your host, Dayna Gowan. I'm so excited that you're joining today. As with every episode, so excited that you're here. But I'm especially excited for this episode because this is a part 2 follow-up, check-in episode, whatever you want to call it. We are following up with a previous guest, Joe Van Haecke. And I love these kind of episodes because we get to check in and see how life is going, what's going on in their world, and I'm really excited to see what comes up today in this episode. And if you're new, joining us for the first time, welcome. The goals of this podcast are 1, to help you understand the benefits of improvisation and applied improvisation. 2, to demonstrate how improv shows up in all aspects of our lives, because it does. And 3, to inspire you to try new things, get out of your head and judgment zones, and find creative outlets that light you up and align and make you feel great. And our guest today is so much fun. He's an experienced improviser, performer, teacher, and honestly, he's just so much fun to talk to. I finally had to say, let's hit the record button because we were chatting for about 20 minutes before this. And I was like, we need to hit record so that we capture some of this. So I'm excited to introduce you to and welcome back our special guest, Joe Van Haecke. Joe is based in Des Moines, Iowa. He has been performing and coaching improv for over 20 years and has performed in Des Moines, Chicago, Minneapolis, and Kansas City, Missouri. When we last chatted with Joe, and we'll get into this in the episode, but when we last chatted with Joe, he was the chief of inspiration for his company, Inspire Me, Mr. V, which was an improv-inspired life coaching business, which helped people to start living a yes and life in a yeah, but world. And that was actually the title of that episode, too. Live a yes and life in a yeah, but world. And I love that tagline, by the way. Joe is also an applied improv facilitator. He's not doing much of that right now, but once an applied improv facilitator, always an improv facilitator. Currently, Joe is teaching high school English again and is living out his purpose. And I want to remind you that the first episode with Joe came out in January 2024, so please give that a listen to get kind of the intro and the background and the journey story, because we're going to just pick up where we left off today. So without further ado, please welcome back the super fun, super amazing, super inspiring Joe Van Haecke. Welcome, Joe.
Well, thank you, Dayna. I really appreciate giving me this time here and letting me be here. I'm a little concerned, though, that maybe our best stuff was that 20 minutes before we actually started recording.
I know. Me too. I'm like, oh, gosh, it's kind of like an improv show, right? The few people in the audience, which I'm sure your shows have more than a few, but the few people that have been in my audiences are the only ones who get to experience it. And that's okay. We'll make sure this is worthwhile still for our listeners.
Yes, we most certainly will. So it's been a fascinating journey. I don't know. Where would you like me to start, I guess? I'll throw that out there.
So I'll start. I'll add a little bit of what we chatted about. So first off, to catch everyone up, Joe and I last chatted on the podcast in June 2023. So we recorded in June 2023. The episode came out in January 2024. And Joe, I was thinking about this. And 1, I can't believe it's been that long. If I didn't look it up and you just asked me like, oh, when did we last chat? I would have said, oh, like a year and a half ago or something. No, June 2023, that's almost 3 years. I mean, it's March 2026 now. So rounding up, it's almost 3 years. That's crazy. And so much has happened in my world and in your world.
It most certainly has. So at that time, I was in the midst of growing Inspire Me, Mr. V. And like you said, it was a life coaching business that I was working on, as well as doing applied improvisation facilitation and doing workshops. And that's really where I wanted to go. However, it just hit a point that here in the Midwest, and especially in Iowa, it was very challenging to get that business so it was self-sustaining and sufficient. At the same time, my family was growing, and I've got two boys. The first left off for college, and my youngest one is on the verge of going in this fall. And my wife kind of came down and laid down the laws. You've been working on this for years. We need something more stable and more sustainable. And I had to yes and that. And that was really, really challenging for me. In fact, so I was sending out resumes and using a lot of my connections that I made while building and growing this business, searching for a job. And I didn't know if I wanted to get back into education yet or not. I had a couple of interviews that went really well that either didn't make it. There was one that about halfway through, my gut was going, this is not a good fit. I sat through and finished the interview, but as soon as I got home, I sent out emails to the people that were in the process, and I said, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, but I'll be honest, this is not the right fit for me. And they were very understanding. I never heard back, but also in the interview, they even said that they weren't in any hurry to hire anybody. So I didn't think it was another thing at all.
Good on you to see the red flags and listen to your gut there, because sometimes when you're desperate, or like, and I'm not saying you're desperate, but you want to make something happen, you'll accept the first thing. And even if that first thing doesn't align, sometimes we take it and we realize later there were so many red flags. So anyway, good on you to see the red flags or whatever they were and just be like, no, this isn't for me.
Exactly. And it was one of those things. I was in a position that I couldn't afford to keep doing that all the time. But on the other hand, I had worked with myself and knew myself well enough to make sure you get something that feels like a good fit. So I'd interviewed for one school that should have been a shoe-in, and they passed me up. And I was a little hurt by that because I'd been doing a lot of subbing and guest teaching at that school already. A lot of the teachers loved me. A lot of the students, all the students loved me when I was there. And so I was really a little surprised and thought, okay, maybe that's the universe telling me education is not where you're supposed to be. Weird, awkward twist of fate. The next day I had to go back and sub in the school. So I'm there and I'm like, I'm going to put all my feelings aside for a moment. I'm going to yes and myself that I can compartmentalize and still come in and do the best job that I am, because that's who I am. So during the planning or as students were working, I'm online on my laptop looking for jobs, and I find something, an opportunity in the school in the community next to me. So I thought, okay, actually, out of all the districts that are here in central Iowa, really, I feel that's the only other one that I would be interested in. So that was, I want to say, a Monday. I interviewed on Wednesday, and Thursday got the offer, and that was 3.5 years ago, 2.5 years. I'm in my third year. I can't do the math at the moment. I teach English, not math. So
yes.
Then it's been really just a blessing, and I feel very honored. I do miss the improv aspect and thinking improv all the time, because that's what Inspire Me, Mr. V was all about. However, I really feel I'm living out my purpose right now, and I still find that I'm weaving in everything that I believe about improv and the benefits that it can do for us as human beings into every day, into my lessons, into how I interact with my fellow staff members, my administration, and most importantly, how I interact with my students.
Thanks for catching us up a little bit. And I looked at your website, Inspire Me, Mr. V, and I saw you have a little note on there that this website is active until, I think, the fall 2026. And you said you went back into education and you feel like you're living out your purpose. And so you taught before this, right? So you took a break from teaching. How long did you teach before the break?
I taught for 10 years.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
prior to that, I had worked in big and small business in either training departments, or my last job before becoming a teacher, I worked in interactive media for a small film and video production company. So
Oh, nice.
I have experience and dabbled in a lot of things. And it was while I was working at that media company that I started working with high school students, coaching improv for their speech contest teams. And I could have the worst day. Clients not happy, projects getting behind schedule. Who knows what else would happen during the day. And I could end the day and go spend 2.5 hours or so with those students coaching improv and us having fun. And all of the ickiness of the day just went away. And that's where along the line that I realized this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I actually asked them one rehearsal, I was like, do you guys think I would make a great high school teacher? And they, without a doubt, I was working with 10 or 12. Immediately, all of them said, yes, it would be fantastic. And I went back to school and got my teaching certificate and then taught for 10 years. And I hit a point that I was a little burned out and was having trouble finding joy.
As education will do to teachers in the U.S., at least, they burn them out hard. Yeah.
That's a whole nother tangent. That's a whole nother episode there, Dayna.
For sure. Yep. Exactly. We could talk about that for hours. I know. Yeah.
Exactly. So I went back to school, got my teaching certificate, and taught for 10 years. And then, as I mentioned, burnt out. And so I resigned that position and was thinking, I didn't have anything lined up. What do I do now? And I started just, should I go into corporate training? Should I do this? Should I do this? And my wife was like, you've always had this dream of teaching improv, period. Why don't you chase that for a while? And I was like, yes, I will. Found a coach here in Central Iowa that I worked with. I really enjoyed his work, and he was very helpful and very beneficial, and learned the importance of networking and how to make connections and how to build your network and grow connections. I could just never meet the right people to get the big yes and to the yes and, I guess you'll say, if you want to put it that way. So I did have success and some very good workshops and some one-on-one improv coaching, which was when a client reached out to me and asked if we could do this one-on-one. I was thinking, I'm not sure how that works, but I yes-anded that idea and dove in. And then out of that experience came the whole idea of, I don't need to be doing a workshop with a group of people. I could also do one-on-one. So I was trying to find what's the best path to do that. Meanwhile, trying to pay bills, I'm substitute teaching. I ended up with a part-time teaching job at Drake University as an adjunct professor.
Oh, nice.
So that was a nice little cap. And that opened up because the dean of one of their new colleges, which was a 2-year college, found out that I did improv and said, I need somebody to teach this organizational improv class. He had done a lot of research and really bought into the idea of the importance of the skills that we come out of improv. How do we apply them and use them on a daily basis? I never thought I'd be a college professor. And now I can say, hey, yeah, I taught college for 3 or 4 semesters. I'm very proud of that. So when I had to, I'm going to say bite the bullet for just because it was a tough pill to swallow at the time to go back and educate. And my first semester, I did a lot of reflecting and a lot of discussing with myself because I felt I had failed. Part of me felt I had given up. And you mentioned the website that is I just changed it yesterday to have that notice that the website's going out of business in this August.
Mm-hmm.
So another person that I follow out of Kansas City, and he's a coach and a speaker as well. And I'm sorry, Dayna, I have to be honest with you. I do listen to other podcasts.
What? No, you just stop.
It's not you. It's me. It's not you.
You cheat on this podcast with other podcasts? Get out. Episode ended. We're done. We're
okay,
through.
Well, yeah, it's been nice. I know. But seriously, you'll have other guests. You'll have other listeners. There's a whole world of listeners out there for you.
You know what? All right. I hear you. You can listen to others, but you still have to listen to this one.
Of course. Because I love to hear myself talk. So I'll just put this on certain loop. So
Yeah. Deal. We'll shake on it.
very good. Okay. Nevertheless, Travis had an episode, and it was one of those of I didn't know what to listen to going into work. I'm like, I'm going to listen to Travis today. And he talked about that idea of, hey, you need to admit and be honest with yourself that you've quit. Not saying you can't pick up whatever it is that you've done again, but the idea that you're telling people that, oh, it's on a back burner, or I'm going to get to it soon, or this or that, you're lying to yourself and to others. And I reached out to him that week when I listened to it. I said, thank you so much. That was the language and the message that I really needed to hear. And he's like, brother, I'm glad. I love that I speak to you. I'm sad that you're doing this, but I understand because teaching is a full-time job. And as I would like to be able to like make time during the day when I'm home from school. When you teach English, you're either bringing home papers to read, books to read to prepare for the next day or planning, or, and many teachers will attest to this, you're just exhausted.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
And I that my first semester back, it reminded me, oh, this is an exhausting job. And I was trying to figure out what is it about that. And a lot of it is decision fatigue. And I'll be honest, when I first heard about decision fatigue, like that's not a thing, even though we know that Einstein wore the same thing, Steve Jobs wore the same thing, because that's one less decision they have to make during the day. When you're a teacher, and I would imagine this is why healthcare professionals feel exhausted as well. When you're a teacher, you are constantly making decisions. Some you're not even necessarily conscious of because the brain's working in its own mindset of, oh, that student, I see they're passing a note. Do I keep going with it, or do I make the decision to stop class and tack on that? That kid's on their phone. That kid's doing that. And so you're making all these decisions, and you have to make the decisions that feel what's best for my classroom environment in the moment. So you're constantly yes-anding and you're getting all this input. At the end of the day, it's exhausting.
I imagine the distractions from speaking in the corporate world or doing workshops to adults. I like to think that we get the attention. We get probably more attention or focus, but adults' attention spans are short too. Now, they're probably not passing notes, but, adults will get on their phones too and check out, for whatever reason, they check their phones. I can't imagine with teenagers and teaching. And I'm sure your school has a policy like no phones allowed and all that, and they still sneak them in, or they probably have them on them, but yeah, they still sneak and check it. And there's probably so much drama around the phones. And oh my gosh, another podcast episode for another time.
A whole other episode. What's been helpful this year, and I know many states are looking into it as well. Iowa wasn't the first, but Iowa did pass a law last year that said phones are banned in the classroom educational environment. So students can have them with them. They just can't be out in the classroom. So during passing time or during lunch, or if they have what we call as an open period where they don't have a class, not even a study hall, our building has a number of common spaces where students can go and hang out and unwind. It would be nice if they would realize, oh, I have time that I could be working on this paper, or I could be preparing for my AP Chem test, or whatever else they've got going on. So the choice there is often made of like, I'm going to hang out with my friends, or I'm going to spend time on my phone. I don't have an answer for that, but at least now I've got stronger school policies as well as state legislature backing me up when I say, look, I've asked you 3 times already, and this is an exaggeration because I would never let it go that far, but I've seen you on your phone. I hinted that you need to put it away because our policy is we're past the warning period. I'm technically, I need to send you to the office now, and I really don't want to do that. So could you politely? And students have been much more understanding and compliant without the power struggles that I used to have with phones.
Speaking of power struggles with phones, I have oh my gosh, she is 19 months. She's going to be 20 months next week. That's crazy. A 20-month-old. I can't believe it. That is a new development from the last time we chatted on the podcast. Yeah. But I have a power struggle with phones with her because, and I know you're not supposed to do screen time with little kids, but we use it sparingly for diaper changes because otherwise she is a Tasmanian devil monster that rolls around and won't let you change her diaper. And so we've started letting her watch phones or YouTube. She loves Sesame Street. She'll
Great.
watch Sesame Street YouTube shows. But, at first she was just happy to watch it. And now, after 2 or 3 little quick videos, if I try to take it away, she's throwing tantrums and stomping everywhere. It's like, mama, mama, mama. So it starts early. And I mean, it's, she sees us on our phones. She sees how cool the phone is. It plays Elmo. So anyway, again, another episode for another time.
Yeah.
But I feel the power struggle with the phones there.
And it's, I have no answer or response to that. And I know that while we kept phones away from my boys for as long as we could,
Mhm.
they were watching movies and video games maybe earlier than in an idealistic world when I first became a father that I wanted. So
Right.
it is such a challenging time for all of us, I feel, because we do rely on the technology and the phones, and we seem to be on them all the time. Yet we want to try to raise our children without them and try to support the schools when we're supposed to be learning. So it'll be interesting to see what the next 3 to 5 years bring with some of the research that I'm starting to see pop up already. So
About phones and stuff?
about screens, actually, and screens and where that's leading our students these days. And there's a lot of research that says that's leaning into the idea that we need to put computers and screens away, period, whether it's a phone or
Yeah.
an iPad or a laptop, and get back to pen and paper. And I believe, I'm going to back up a little bit. My first teaching stint, my school went 1-to-1, which is the idea of we're going to issue devices, which were old iBooks at the time, and then we went to iPads. So every student is issued one of those and they get to keep it. And we do a lot of teaching through the screens that way. We can build lessons or use some of the learning management systems to build like repositories for resources for students. Great idea. Really love it. Research now is, and so when that happened, I was fresh out of my job where I was doing interactive media and film and video production. So I was buying into that. I'm like, yes, let's go. This is the wave of the future. It didn't take me long for my pendulum to swing back and realize maybe having a book in your hand instead of trying to read it on the screen is better. Maybe writing the cover. And so I've done some research into that. And I've noticed even my students now that if I have them handwrite either an outline or their first draft or a planning document for their papers, if they do that by hand, their end product is so much better than if they just sit down and start to type stuff out. I get to hear their
Interesting.
more than the voice of the laptop. And now the big struggle is AI and ChatGPT or whoever else that can write a paper, a 5-paragraph essay that almost sounds like a student wrote it. So
Almost,
almost.
but not quite. Not
I
quite.
feel, and I, in the back of my mind, I'm getting that little voice that sometimes it pops up in a show or in a workshop that we have taken a left turn and are really far off, improperly speaking, and now we're more in an educational.
Oh no,
I don't want to hijack that from us because I do want to talk about improv still.
Oh, well, okay. Yes, we're going to circle back to improv and education because it sounds like you use it.
Yes.
And I have big feelings and thoughts and opinions on AI, artificial intelligence too. And we can also talk about that in a minute. But I do want to circle back because you talked about the business ending or feeling like it failed a bit and, it didn't see the success that you had in your mind and the expectations you had for it. Right. And I'm listening to that right now because I'm on the journey. So for me, I started my business and it was a side hustle for 3 years. And then we moved in August 2025 from Los Angeles to Charlotte, North Carolina. So across the country, big move, big change. And I was able to go full time in my business. And so I've been in my business now for about 7-8 months, like full time ish. Let's be
Yeah.
clear. I'm not working full time hours, but I now have the time, or what I thought would be the time that I needed. And you know what? Here's a lesson learned. There's never enough time to do
Right.
everything. There's never enough time. And so, yeah, I'm really interested in this, your journey. And I feel like this is really valid for people in similar journeys who want to do this applied improv work or just start their own business in general. And I don't know, I wanted to circle back to those feelings. And
Yes.
yeah, do you think you will pick it up again, or you'll use those skills to then start something new? What are your thoughts for moving on?
Dayna, that's a great question. I haven't thought that far ahead. Now, ask me to circle back to that here in just a few moments. I do still want to teach improv and do workshops. So right now, I'm looking at, first of all, what fits with my schedule. But the other challenge that I have is finding space. So not
Mhm.
necessarily applied improv workshops, but maybe just improv workshops. And maybe that's the way to start. So part of me is maybe if I start in a different path, I can get to where I was hoping to with the business, or eventually something similar. So the theater where my troupe is now performing, they have recently been able to expand their building
Mm.
and are building out a new classroom space that should be ready later this year. And I'm hoping that I can squeeze into their schedule because I know I've talked with the managers or the owners, the committee, the people that be, and they're very excited about that, the possibility of holding improv workshops and classes there, just finding out when it can fit in the schedule once that classroom is open. So it'll be challenging because I know that they're already busting at the seams. And so this classroom space is obviously going to be in high demand almost as soon as it's ready. There's a voice teacher that works out of there. I'm not sure if there's any instruments being taught out of there. There's
Oh,
also
wow.
people teaching, especially little kids like elementary and middle school kids, theater, because they want to get involved in theater and do more theater. And so I'm looking at,
Mm.
I would love to get high school improv workshops going, or even for adults, those of us that are out of high school but are interested in it. And I always like to say to people that are interested, I'm like, come take a class and see what you think. And honestly, if you go through this 6-week class and you never want to set on foot on stage or do improv again, that's great. But just think about, hey, you stepped out of your comfort zone and tried something new.
Yeah. What's the theater called that's in your area?
So there are a number of them. The one I'm associated with now is called Tallgrass Theater.
Nice.
And they've been around over 20 years now, which is crazy to think about because they started off just grassroots and hit a point where they were looking for space and had one space lined up, but then that fell through, had another space lined up, and then that fell through. And they were renting the theater space in an old elementary school. And then that school district came and said, we need you to leave because we have other plans for this. And they found, it's an amazing story. The building used to be a roller skating rink.
Oh, wow.
And now it's divided into 2 or 3 areas, and they have leased one area. And like I said, now they've got this new space that they're making into a classroom. And they, in the contract that they've signed, they have first denial rights to any other space as it becomes available through the course of time.
That's cool. So I'll admit and tell you too that my husband and I had a conversation a few weeks ago about just how life is going in Charlotte and the working situation and stuff. And he admitted to me that he wanted me to go back to corporate and get a corporate
Oh,
job, 9 to 5. And I said, I need more time, you know, to be honest, 9 to 5 right now with a 20-month-old. I know people do it. Tons of people do it. They do it all the time. it would be so challenging.
Mhm.
It would be very taxing on us as a family, and I would prefer to not do it if I can, right? If I can have any control there. And honestly, if things change, financial situations, yes, so I'll get back into the corporate space. But I was like, give me more time. And, I'm really learning a lot about myself right now in this time to work on my business. And, because when it was a side hustle, it was always, well, I'll work on it late at night and I'll work it on the weekends. And I never did a ton of networking. Like I would try to go to Applied Improv Network open space and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And
Mhm.
I mean, improv, I can find guests for the podcast everywhere. Like everybody's doing improv in some way, shape, or form. So that wasn't hard to find guests. But now that I'm here and I have more time to network, I'm learning that I have incredible FOMO and I want to do all of the things all the time. I think I'm in 5 different networking groups, which all cost money.
Yeah.
And then I go to the networking groups and I meet people and they're like, well, let's go to lunch. And me being in a new place, I'm like, well, I want new friends and I want new connections. And so I'm like going out to lunch more and those are all great things, but it's like, okay, I need to rein it in a little bit, right? I need to have time to work on the business. And it's such a delicate balance because the people you meet can be great connections and collaborations. And those people can say yes and to what you're doing and, can lead to great things. And also I need to do work on the back end, right? I need to build
Right.
it. So anyway, this is a long tangent of just saying it's quite a different feel from being like a side hustle to now your main focus. And there's a lot more pressure that comes with it being the main focus. And I know for you, you had some like side jobs that, helped pay the bills, but I mean, your coaching business and workshop business, you tried to make it the main focus, right? That was the
Eh,
goal.
That was the goal. Exactly. And I just hit a point where I wasn't getting enough business coming through on a regular basis. So I was doing like a side hustle to my side hustle to my side hustle, I guess, between
Right.
being the adjunct professor and substitute teaching. And I like to call it guest teaching, but substitute teaching, that it became harder and harder and harder to even make time to work on the business. And at that point, I was also so much working on the business instead of working for the business. And that's really where the fun is for me. Working for the
Yeah.
business is getting out there and meeting people and doing the improv workshops.
Mhm.
And as you found, I was on a very limited budget business wise. So all these networking events that I would go to, yeah, come join us, come join us, come join us. And here's how much it costs.
It's exhausting.
It was exhausting. And I was having such, like I got to a point that I was posting quite regularly once a week and people would expect that, but I wasn't getting much traction out of that. And you can keep boosting yourself up as much as you can, but sometimes it's nice to get feedback. So when I would get that feedback of like, Joe, I read your post. That was fantastic. You right on. I was like, great, thanks. Did you comment on it? Did you share it? Did you like it? Help me, and that was slipping through the cracks as well. And I just wonder if maybe it's just Iowa is a little more conservative in that like that applied improv idea is maybe a little too much of a stretch sometimes, or we're just very particular about where we're going to spend money and invest in our people.
Mhm.
I don't know. So now being a little bit farther removed from it, it's easier to say for me to reflect and look and say, I didn't fail. I did have success, and I'm proud of jumping out of my comfort zone and trying. So I think that left a definitive mark on my sons. And during that time, I was involved in the coaching world, and I remember this distinctly. And I went through a couple programs to become a certified life coach, and I learned so much on how to
Mm.
approach different things and how to work with people, and also about myself. And I remember I was in a mastermind at one time, And we were broken out into some breakup rooms. And I was talking to 3 or 4 people. And I said, I don't know where this is going to go, but I can say this for a fact. I was a good teacher. I was a really good teacher. Where I am now, if I were to ever go back, I'd be an even better teacher. And I feel that's the case now. I'm much stronger in confrontations. I still don't like them. Not anything I enjoy having to call a student out and say, let's go out into the hallway and talk. However, I use all those life coaching skills, that questioning approach immediately. Why did I ask you out here? What's going on? What's going to be different? What's going to happen if this doesn't change? What does success look like to you in this moment? And by that, I'm putting a lot more accountability onto students themselves to hold themselves responsible. And it's just, I walk out of those conversations feeling a lot better about my teaching.
How else do you find that you're using these, coaching skills, improv skills now that you're back in the teaching game and teaching world? How else is it helping?
I rarely lose my cool. And I know
Yeah.
there are some teachers that if you push their buttons just enough, they're going to fly off the handle, which is unfortunate, but we're only human, right? You can only feel so
Mhm.
much. And however, and I was doing this before then, but even more so now, I call it the yes and moment. When we're talking about improv, we talk about that yes and moment, or maybe I learned that from Joe Bill. I don't remember where it came from, but that moment that your scene partner makes their move, whether it's a line, what they say in response to the line that you just said, but there's that moment where you're yes anding, you're listening and accepting what they have, and your brain is functioning as it does. And how am I going to build on this? And I always talk about that idea. We always have a choice, right? In that moment, you have a choice on how you're going to respond. I think people that haven't gone through improv training and thought about that yes and moment, they fall back into their defaults that they've learned throughout their life to get them to wherever they are in that moment. And if that's, oh, I'm going to react with anger or with sad or with hurt, that's their default. That's what they're always going to react with. This is the great thing about improv is we're taught in that yes and moment, you have a choice on what emotional choice are you going to make. And thinking of shows, right? In a show, when you make the choice that's completely 180 degrees opposite of what your scene partner is expecting or the audience is expecting, that's hilarious. When you make the choice that the audience is expecting, and instead of going to ramping it up to 10, you ramp it up to 11 or 12 and really knock it out of the park, that's hilarious. And audience love that. That idea of the yes and moment we can use all the time. So this is a long story on getting there. I can remember a time I was working with a student, helping him write a paper. And I had 2 of my other students sitting close by, and it was like in a homeroom type situation. So they might've been playing cards or talking about the NBA or whatever they were doing, but they were partially listening because this student would write a sentence and then say, I'm done. And it would be easy to get frustrated and walk away in that moment.
Yeah.
I kept
Very frustrated.
ending. I'm like, yes, you've got that. And we also need this. And over the course of maybe 20 minutes, eventually I got 1 paragraph out of that student,
Yeah.
which doesn't sound like much as adults. Most students, you're like, but you have to understand, there are some students that, even though they're in high school, writing a paragraph is a challenge, or writing a paragraph is something that they don't see any value in whatsoever.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
finished up with that, and my improv brain was going, good job. You handed all the way through, and you ended the scene, if you will, with the outcome that you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
The bell rings, and these 2 students, other students, are sitting next to me, and they turn to me and they're like, Mr. Van Haecke, you have the patience of a saint. And that really meant a lot to me because I was yes-anding every moment of interacting with the first student.
Mm.
And using that yes and moment, I could easily make the choice to get frustrated and walk away. I could easily make the choice to say something really sarcastic and cutting,
Mhm.
which might be appropriate in a scene, or if it was written out. But as a teacher, you need to learn. I can be sarcastic with these students. This student I cannot, because they don't get humor, or they don't get my dry sense of humor, or they don't understand sarcasm.
Yeah.
And once you lose a student once, it's even harder to get them back. So I'm using improv every day in all those choices that I make in how am I going to respond to this group of students or this particular student, period. So
That's a really good example. And I imagine you do have the patience of a saint, because
I almost put
I got you
a there. I'm sorry.
I got you mid drink. Yeah. I mean, because kids and teenagers, especially, if they look at you long enough, they will steal your soul, and I don't have teenagers yet, but yeah, I can't even imagine. I used to coach youth volleyball, girls youth volleyball. So I coached ages 13 to 17 for different years.
A big stretch of maturity there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, every year, it's a different level, right? So, yeah. And my sweet spot, or the age I really liked, was 14s, because they kind of had a little bit of awareness of their bodies, but we could still teach the fundamentals a little bit. Because once they're like 15 and up, if they're not doing the steps right, they don't want to learn to do the steps right, kind of thing. So I relate to your story of, like when you were teaching, you were a good teacher, and then finding these improv skills, you felt like you would go back to teaching and be even better at it. And I haven't tested my theory yet, but I feel the same way about coaching, because when I coached, and I was in my late 20s and 30, yeah, and I was very much in my head. I didn't have any improv skills yet. So I coached for about four or 5 years, youth volleyball, after work, just as a nice hobby. No one gets into coaching for the money, just a little side job, mostly to give back, because I played volleyball most of my life and it was a big part of my life. And I wasn't the greatest coach. I got better at it by the end, and then I moved and didn't get back into it. But I really feel now, having these improv skills, these better communication skills, being able to listen, and being more comfortable with myself, really doing the inner work and accepting myself and allowing myself to be silly and be seen and just be who I am. I've really gone on this journey. And so maybe when my daughter gets older, and if she wants to play volleyball, I won't force it, but we will have volleyballs in the house. If she wants to play volleyball, I might get back into coaching. And I feel like I would be a much better coach when I do get back into it. So I can relate hard to that sentiment.
Right on. I got snaps for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it makes me a better parent too. And yeah, any comments to that too?
Yes. Yeah. And I want to touch on one thing you mentioned there, and I can't remember how you said it, but something about judging yourself, right? And that's one thing that I really just fight, and I don't know where it starts. And I think just part of the education system in general, not in just the United States, but like globally, because of the way it works. And we end up teaching students to really judge themselves and build a fear of failure to the point that they won't even try, which is frustrating as a teacher. I can't help you grow or learn if you don't give me something. And so you've got students that are perfectionists, which improv skills will help us get around. You've got students that have a fear of failure, which improv skills will help us get around. And you've got the judgment going on of either yourself and or other students. That's the biggest enemy right there. If we can get away from that and take judgment out, which is what improv teaches us to do, stop judging our own ideas, stop judging your scene partner's ideas. So it's 12 years of, and even more so, of structures that unintentionally cut down our creativity and build these imposing mental blocks that teachers are struggling to fight against, that improv can help break down.
so much good stuff there. And I just think about the power that teachers have too. And I know you know this power. I mean, how many stories have you heard from people? And a lot of it's like an art teacher or maybe a theater teacher. You know, the art teachers, you're not good at drawing, or, you know, this is terrible. And, you know, you should never paint or draw again, or at least that's how people perceive it. And then they think they're not creative. It happens a lot too in other subjects and studies, and or maybe it's not the teacher, but it's just they get a bad grade, and then it's labeled as, I'm not good at this. I'm just not good at math. I'm not good at it. And I mean, I can relate so hard to just being the perfectionist, wanting to get the good grades, and then you get into the workplace where there are still grades of performance reviews and stuff like that, but there's not as many grades. So I have thoughts and I don't have fixes, but there are better ways that we can do it. And it just sounds like, Joe, that you're being the best possible teacher and version of yourself that you can be for these students. It sounds like you're making a real impact.
Dayna, I'm just going to let that sit for a moment because that's very meaningful to me. Thank you for that. So I just want to honor that moment. And I do my best. And there are days that maybe my best is not what I consider my best, but I have to recognize that that was my best that I had for that day. And I tend to be really vulnerable and open with my students. Again, another thing that improv training has made me comfortable in is being vulnerable. And I will let them know if I get to a day that the morning starts off and I know I don't have my best today. I let them know, I'm like, I'm going to bring you the best that I have, which is not what you're used to today. And I find oftentimes that students will give you grace, but also then as the day progresses, that ceiling for my best keeps raising on its own. And suddenly by the end of the day, I'm like, that was a really good day. I don't know what I was worried about. So
yes, I have an exercise that I like to use for different workshops, different topics, but it's called I Made It Here Today. And
all right.
basically we just say, even though I blank, so it could be like, I spilled coffee on myself, I have yogurt stains on my shirt from my daughter eating yogurt and then touching me and all that stuff. Even though I didn't get a whole lot of sleep, even though I'm overwhelmed, even though I have a ton of stuff on the to-do list, whatever's going on in your mind, how it relates, even though I have a lot going on and I was worried about coming here today and then what that means for how much I'm going to have to do later, I still made it here today. And that is really powerful in the workplace to be able to say that too, because I mean, I'm just relating this to the workplace.
Yeah.
We show up on Zoom. We have a ton of virtual meetings. We see these people in these little virtual squares and boxes, but we don't get to know the person behind it. And so just that ounce of vulnerability, that special space to share and just be like, I was late today because I spilled coffee and it was a mess and it just started the day off terribly. And I still made it here today. My daughter, my kids are struggling. I feel like I'm struggling and I still made it here today. And I'm showing up as I am. And it just really helps to admit that you can show up the way you are. And I think that's a great model for your students to see an adult admit, hey, I'm not at my best today and I'm still here for you.
I'm actually going to steal that and use it sometime. Thank you so much for that. As an exercise or as a writing prompt, or I do a question of the day when I'm taking attendance, because that way I get to hear every single student's voice. And sometimes you can learn so much just by their quick answer there. So yes, that's great.
Use it.
Yeah.
I got it from someone else. Use it.
That's the beauty of improvisers, right? We're like, here, I have this idea. I'm going to share it with you. The other thing I want to touch on, going back to that, is subtly, it's also, even though my car broke down, I still made it here. That's a point of success. And I'm a firm believer that we don't celebrate our successes enough, regardless of how large or how small, because success breeds success. And now if you're recognizing yeah, my car broke down and I still made it here. Success, right on. Because sometimes,
Yeah.
and showing up is half the battle. So I like that. I'm going to use that. Thank you, Dayna.
Well, and just relating it back to this whole episode, I promise this is like the perfect segue that is just happy accident here. But even though the business didn't work out as you planned, as you deemed successful, that it could be sustainable and still going, you still made it here today on
Yeah,
this episode to share. And I do think it's really valid to share these ups and downs. It's not good or bad. It's not failure and success. It's an ebb and flow of life. And you had to accept what your wife came to you and said, hey, the family needs this. And you said, I recognize
I
that. And I can imagine the inner struggle and all the feelings there of building this business and planting the seeds, and it's hard. It's really hard being a business owner and wanting your little business baby to grow, and we have all these grand ideas. And anyway, so you still made it here today to
yeah, I did.
have a great follow-up episode,
I
right?
remember it. Grace.
Joe, I want to take the quickest of breaks because I do want to come back and ask you about improv and parenting and how that shows up
Okay.
in your parenting style too. So let's take a quick break and we will be right back.
Awesome.
And we're back talking with Joe Van Haecke about all things improv and business and ups and downs and ebbs and flows, improv in the classroom. And I want to get to improv and parenting in a minute, but Joe, I wanted to ask you about a topic that you mentioned to me when we were chatting about this episode and what we could talk about and the different routes and paths we could go on. You mentioned a phrase that I'm not very familiar with, and that is trauma-informed classroom. And I've heard of that. I've had other guests on that have talked about trauma-informed response and therapy and stuff. And I don't really know what that means, and we've never gotten to dive into it. So can you tell us more about trauma-informed and what that means for the classroom?
I will do my best. I'm no expert, and I've read just a few books and had a book study or two. In the classroom, in the educational environment, we are concerned with children that have suffered some traumatic experience in their past. And when that happens, the amygdala takes over, and now we're in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn decision making. And oftentimes, negative behavior or rowdy behavior is because of a student being dysregulated in that they're outside of their comfort zone, such to the point that they're triggered into reliving this traumatic experience that really doesn't act now. And so the amygdala has taken over the brain. It can't function at its higher level. The frontal cortex has completely shut down, and we're just almost reacting like a caged animal. And that's scary for an educational environment, but also it disrupts everything. Teachers are afraid of what happens. So as I've studied this, and again, I'm just scratching the surface, but in my book study, as I'm reading about this and learning that this is why Billy, we'll just use Billy as a nickname, right? While Billy is responding the way he is and throwing over chairs because his brain doesn't know what else to do. And so the trauma-informed classroom is the approach of teaching teachers and training teachers to recognize this student is dysregulated. What can I do to help them calm everything down and shut off the amygdala and become what's known as regulated? So we're back to a situation where and a mental state where we can cope and be successful. So I read about that, and I fortunately have never had to experience it very much, but it definitely sounds like when a student becomes dysregulated and is throwing over chairs or is hiding under a desk, those are extreme behavior examples that the teacher also is becoming dysregulated because now I'm scared for my other students, but I'm also scared for that student. And am I going to be safe? And it's just one thing on top of another.
Yeah.
So going back to improv training, again, I think there's opportunities there for both sides. Teaching the teacher to use their improv skills and react in that yes and moment differently than what they normally would. Also, there are methods and ideas of to teach students of, okay, when you feel this, do these steps, 1, 2, 3, whatever they are. And I've seen that approach in a number of different ways. The problem is when a student becomes dysregulated and their amygdala has taken over, accessing those higher function brain capabilities to know, oh, I need to do 1, 2, and 3. My brain can't reach up there because it's focused here and it senses danger.
Right.
And that's the brain's primary function, is to sense danger and protect us, whatever that is. And so when it's in that state, it can't access those higher function ideas that we have. And so teachers get upset and annoyed that we've talked about this time and time again. When you feel this, do this. Why aren't you doing that? And so then it gets into the student's mindset that I don't know what to do. It's a vicious cycle. I think if we could teach students some improv skills and recognize that yes and moment, maybe they could help themselves become dysregulated while working with a teacher who has improv training, and to really make this back into a functioning classroom and save the moment, instead of oftentimes what happens is that student gets labeled as a problem child or special needs or something or something or something. And then they're a problem child, so we're going to send them to the office all the time. I don't have all the fixes, and I hope if there are any educators listening right now that you're hearing me and not getting defensive, which I know some teachers might, but the more training, the more ideas that teachers can have in their tool belt, improv skills being one of those, I think that gives them a step up to be able to deal with those situations that can happen in a classroom that disrupt everything.
And you gave some extreme examples of throwing chairs or hiding under a desk. How else can it show up, this dysregulated response?
I've seen students stand up and just leave a classroom.
Okay. Yeah.
Oftentimes, they might just bury under their hoodie or bury themselves and maybe fall asleep. And again, in the educational world, we talk a lot about building relationships. What do we do in improv? We build relationships, and it's a brand new scene. So again, I sound like a broken record right now, but those improv skills gives us the ability to build relationships quicker and faster. So it's getting to know your students. What else have I seen? Oftentimes it's avoidance of, my task here is to write a paper, but for some reason, my brain senses trying to do that is dangerous. There's a danger to me, and so I'm going to do anything else. So you got to think about fight. That becomes the turning over of tables or the poking somebody else to get them to react or respond, so they get in trouble. And now the teacher is not paying attention to me, or the teacher is completely off their lesson plan because they're dealing with this issue. Freeze. I'm just going to shut down and not do anything, or focus on the paper and stare at it, but I haven't done anything. But as long as I'm making it look like I might be doing some work, okay. Flight, like I said, some students will just find a reason to get out of the classroom, or extreme situations, just walk out of the classroom on their own.
Yeah.
The fawn response, which is, I'll do anything you ask me to do, so as long as I can avoid whatever it is that's dysregulating me.
Okay. And I think the awareness of it, of like, this student's dysregulation is now dysregulating me.
Yes.
And the tools that I can use to not get dysregulated, or to help become more regulated again, so that I can be more in charge and in command as the teacher. I mean, that is huge.
Yeah.
And it sounds like this is hopefully becoming more commonplace, but I just feel like, back when we were in school, this was probably not a topic that
Right. No,
teachers had in
no.
their toolbox either, right?
I've thought often, if I were to go back and get a doctorate in education, this would be my focus. Alas, I'm
Mm-hmm.
at a point in my career and with two sons off in college or about to start college. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but that would be the doctorate that I would pursue.
Yeah. Well, yes, and if I know you're back in education, you having this experience in education and being able to relate improv and the tools and techniques. I mean, who was your audience for your workshops before? Was it more corporate or were you trying to focus on
It
education?
was definitely more corporate. And now that I'm back in the
Yeah.
education world, I see the potential for how can we get there? And so
Yeah.
maybe that's the in route, right? Is starting to do
Yeah.
my district in early August has a day of conferences. I don't even know what to call it, but a day of training where other teachers
Yeah.
will have like small little 45-minute workshops. And I said to myself earlier this year, I was like, okay, I'm 3 years in. It's time to do a workshop at that professional development day.
For sure. In my previous job, my full-time job, I was an employee wellness consultant and I helped a lot of school districts. Our primary clients were school districts and public agencies. And I think I had 7 or 8 school district clients. And one of them had a professional development day. And I remember they were like 4 hours away. It was quite a long drive. And I did a professional development applied improv class for them. I'm trying to remember what I called it. Oh my gosh. It was something about communication and collaboration. I might have said it might have been 3 C's of applied improv training. So it was
I
like
love it.
communication, collaboration, and connection. And I had to do it twice. There were 2 rounds,
Mhm.
2 groups. And the first group was really small. I think it was like 6 people. And they liked it, and then they moved on. And then the next group was larger. And so I had to adjust the exercises. And one man raised his hand. I think he might have been one of the football coaches or something, is what I gathered. But he said, "This session is so powerful. These skills of communication is so powerful. Why is the district leadership not doing this training too?" He's like,
Mm.
"Why are the teachers doing this and not district leadership?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I'm not privy to those decisions. I'm just offering the workshop here." But I was like, "Yeah, he's right." And there was a lot of other topics, a lot of wellness topics and how to take care of yourself, self-care and eating healthy and just, how to just be a better version of you. And I think just that topic was a little different from the
Mhm.
usual ones. And so, yeah, that was like 4 or 5 years ago now. That just came back to me of the power in these type of workshops and how useful they can be for teachers and district leadership too.
That's powerful when you've got teachers recognizing that this is viable and useful, and we're not the only ones that should be thinking along this route.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so just, interesting seeds to plant there in your mind. I would love to hear how that workshop goes when you offer it
All
next
right,
school year.
I will let
Hopefully
you
you
know.
present it and they say yes and to the idea, but there's something there. And, now you have the experience in education that you can connect the dots of like how improv
Mhm.
connects with teachers. And I don't know, maybe that's your next venture. Maybe for part 3 follow-up, you'll be on and be like, I'm
Wow.
teaching improv to teachers now.
That would not be a bad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to the improv and parenting,
Yeah.
I've noticed that improv has made me, I mean, I don't know. I'm only been a parent for 20 months to one child and I've had these improv skills. But I can imagine that these improv skills have helped me tremendously as a parent. And it got me through some hard times and tough times. And there were also times where I struggled with it. Will I ever like improv again? When you're in survival mode and
Yes.
sleep deprivation, you're like, nothing's funny. Why did I do this work? Yes, and what? This doesn't make any sense. I literally just needed to sleep. That's all I needed. But how do you use it as your kids have grown? You've had the experience now of the babies and
Yes.
toddlers and now teenagers. How are you using it?
I used it a lot. Again, I'm going to go back to that idea of that yes and moment, especially when they're toddlers and not knowingly, but you're super tired. You've had a day, you're at wit's end, and you get that yes and moment of, I'm going to snap. I need to choose something else. There were not often, but once or twice that between my wife and I, we hit that point that it's like, I can't do this anymore. Can you please? And handed the son back and forth. It was like, okay, I got you. What?
Yeah.
I haven't reflected or don't know that I was actually conscious so much of it, but I think just the positivity and the joy of being a dad, I let that flow through me and let my improv skills respond to things that other parents might get really upset about, that my brain was going, yes, you could get upset. And is it really worth getting upset about? I don't know. I think I was just at times maybe too much, or maybe so, you as a parent, it's hard. You're always wondering, have I done everything? Have I done it right? And I believe that by the time when they're 18 and they're going off to college or whatever is the next chapter in their journey, you just have to look back and accept that you've done the best that you could with what you had. And so for me, I don't know that I was ever made a conscious or explicit idea that I'm going to apply improv to my parenting. I think my parenting came through my improv, if that makes sense.
Yes, for sure. We're not going, okay, I need to say yes and to the situation. I need to be more mindful and present in the moment. It's more just they're choices that you make because you have these skills now. Yeah. Yeah. And I find I get I get in my head a lot on timing and the amount of time it takes to do something. Like right now, I think she got up at 7:30 or 8. She sleeps a little bit later, I think, than most kids. And you know what? I'm like, we're not changing that. Like, I'm gonna enjoy the schedule that we're on, because in a few years we're gonna be in that school swing of things where she has to be at school at 7:30 or 8 a.m. We'll have to get up earlier. And for now, I'm really trying to enjoy the flexibility. We won't always have that flexibility, right? And some days I'm like, gosh, I wish we could do daycare drop off at 8 a.m. That would give me more time to go to more networking events that I want to go to. But the daycare drop off usually happens at 10, and like today, 10:30, because it takes a while to do breakfast and then clean up from breakfast and then get dressed and then take away the phone and then have the tantrum and then put the shoes. Like, it all just takes a lot of time. And my I could do it a lot quicker. And he can, because I do sometimes infuse some play. If there's a good song and she's dancing, I'm like, I want to dance with her. Let's have fun with this. And other days I'm like, come on, let's move. Yeah. To that point, I just sometimes need to remind myself to stay present. And I notice that when I do stay present and more flexible, I enjoy the moments more as a parent.
For sure. And the idea of, she's dancing, let's dance together. Yes, anding their moments of joy just become those really powerful moments that you'll look back on and go, yes, that was it. And I'm sure you've had friends or parents or other people that have told you, enjoy every moment because you're not going to believe how fast it goes. I mean, from day one, my father was like, enjoy every moment. And sure enough, suddenly he's 18, or he became 16 and got his license, was off driving. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
That's a day that you'll hit a point that you're like, I'm really looking forward to when he's 16 and can drive himself to soccer practice. And
Yeah.
yet, then it's 2 years later, we're like, he's leaving already. What am I going to do?
I know, because the house is so quiet when they're not there.
And I think this surprises some parents. And this is the one thing I'm concerned about is for the past 20-ish years, my identity has been the father, right?
Mm. Yeah.
And now that they're graduating and going off to college, yes, I'm still their dad. And
Yeah.
but
Always will be.
and our
Yeah.
relationship is changing, which I'm looking forward to that as well. Yet, what's my identity now? Or what's my
Yeah.
identity going to be in 6 months? So these are the things I know a lot of friends are like, oh, I'm an empty nester finally. I'm not overly looking forward to that for a number of reasons. One is that identity issue. The other is I enjoy having them around the house and I love just hanging.
Yeah.
Even if some days I come home and he's already home locked up in his room and he's playing Minecraft or whatever, and I don't get to see him at all, but just having him physically present.
The identity thing is huge. It's huge when they come into the world and your identity changes to become the parent. And then 18 to 20 years later, it changes again as they leave the nest and fly away and, of course, come back,
Yes.
But yeah, the identity changes are huge. And I think it's important to acknowledge that and not brush them off or push them
Right.
down. You have to acknowledge those identity shifts. And yeah, because I experienced that for sure when she was born. I was like, who am I? What am I? For me, it felt like the world kept going and moved on, and I was like stuck in, or day to day, I was just trying to survive and keep this tiny little infant fed and stuff. But everyone else has moved on and they're doing these big things. They're going to work, and I can't imagine going to work right now. Right.
Right.
Everything felt so hard. Yeah.
Yeah. And then finding the balance to still do improv is a whole nother, smaller ball of wax. And honestly, when my oldest, who turns 21 next month or in 2 months,
Oh
when
my
he was
gosh.
when he was
Wow.
born, I thought, well, this would be the end of my improv career. And my wife, she was totally supportive. She's like, why? I'm like, well, she's like, we'll work it out. I know how important improv is to you. And so
Oh,
I just keep going and just keep loving it to no end. And what really surprised me is that I could not convince either of them. I have 2 sons. I couldn't convince either of them to give improv a try. Now,
maybe it'll come later.
maybe it'll come later. But I think watching me, though, they picked up some of that yes and mentality approach without me having to explicitly teach it or anything. So,
Yeah. I know. We could also do a whole episode, lots of different episode topics for later, another time, but improv and parenting is a big one there. And there's just so much that can help.
there's a new gentleman on LinkedIn whose name I can't remember.
I think his name's Jeremy Strozer. I don't know if I'm saying the last name correctly.
That sounds
or
right.
not.
Yes. And
Yeah.
I reached out to him. I need to, because we were going to do a Zoom to meet because I thought his approach was like fantastic. So,
Yes. I have followed him and I like a lot of his stuff. I haven't listened to it yet because I solely listen to my podcast and no one else does. No, I'm just kidding. I just don't, there's limited time.
Yeah.
But all the titles and topics he puts out, I'm like, oh, fascinating. So yeah, he's on my short list of guests
I
to
love it.
reach out to because, yeah, that's a great niche. Joe, I want to remind you of something you said
Okay.
too. We chatted in June 2025, and I took some notes on just what we talked about. And I have in quotes, none of us have it figured out.
Yes.
Yeah. And I assume you said that, not me, because I
I'm-
wouldn't have written it down if I said it. So you told me in June, which is when I was moving, we were getting ready to move and work was ending. I was going to go full time in my business and I was nervous about the move. There's so much uncertainty ahead. And I have right here in quotes, none of us have it all figured out. And that is very helpful to be reminded of time and time again, that none of us have it figured out.
And I think it's hard to learn and sometimes hard to accept. And I don't remember what we were talking about when that came out, but I know the time that sticks in my memory where I used that, I was talking to my oldest son. His name is Gabe. And he was a senior. He was a senior in high school at the time. And we were talking about college, and he was hesitant and was leading into a gap year. And when that first came up, I was like, I don't know how comfortable I am with that. And so we talked about it. Well, I just want to have it figured out. And through our talk, it came out that he felt all his friends have it figured out. And I just chuckled. I'm like, okay, that's fair. I said, Gabe, you have to know none of us have it figured out. Yeah. Some of us think we do. And then just like an improv scene, life is going to throw you something different that you are not prepared for. And how you choose to respond to that is going to define how successful you are dealing with that. And yes, it's easy to look around and see people that it appears that they have it figured out. But if we were to scratch and dig hard enough, we would find that spot that they're like just the rest of us, trying to make it through day by day. It's not easy being a human. It's actually really hard. And
it's really hard.
And I tell my students, oh my gosh, I'm getting all teary. I tell my students that I'm like, I'm going to be honest with you. It doesn't get any easier. But as we grow and we have more experiences and the more things that we're willing to look into and try is going to give us more experience and wisdom and knowledge to respond to something that, oh, I've gone through this before, or this is new, but it's also similar to something else. And here's how I dealt with something else. And I can apply that to this completely new thing, whatever that thing is that happens to us in life. So I just, when people walk around or have that attitude of like, I've got it all figured out, my thing is, sure you do, just wait. Because without a doubt, something's going to pop up that's going to completely throw us off our game. And again, how you choose to respond to that and how you respond in those moments reveals the type of leader that you are.
Brilliantly said back in June 2025, and then now in March 2026. And it's such a beautiful reminder that we don't have it figured out. We can be experts in things, but in terms of life always throws us curveballs, and we have the choice in how we respond. And that goes back to the skills and, tools in your tool belt of how you can stay regulated and how you can respond to things. Joe, I love how this conversation turned out.
Yeah.
We showed up here and we had some ideas of how it would go, and we had some ideas on what we would talk about. And I love it because it's a different kind of follow-up than we're used to. Usually we have the follow-up of, well, we talked 2.5 years ago, and now you're crushing it. You're doing all these things in your business, blah, blah, blah. Tell us how it's going. And it's just a slightly different switch. You are crushing it in education. You're crushing it in parenting. You're being there for kids at a very vulnerable time in their lives. So I would label that as crushing it, just in a different way than you thought.
Well, thank you.
So I love how this turned out.
Thank you, Dayna. I'm going to honor that moment, and I really appreciate you recognizing and sharing that with me. And I am too. I love how this came about, and we touched on improv, but we also touched on somebody else, and I think we talked about like how can improv help us be human, basically, right?
It's so true. Because I focus a lot in the workplace, but it really spans beyond that. It's like, how does improv help us be human? Because it is so hard to be human these days and forever, right? But this current time we're living in, it's just hard.
For
And
sure.
it allows us to give ourselves grace. So, Joe, I have had the greatest time chatting with you. I always have a great time chatting with you. And I know our listeners enjoyed it too, this journey of a conversation that we were on. Tell us how we can follow you in this journey as you're figuring it out as you go and figuring out what's next and what's to come.
That's a great question, Dayna. I don't know that I'm posting much on the socials lately, just for my own personal well-being. If you want,
You're busy too.
if people are interested in reaching out, probably the best way is to send it to my personal email, which is joe.vanhaecke@outlook.com. And I'm going to go ahead and put that up on my webpage, or you can find me on LinkedIn at Joe Van Haecke.
Yes, and that's VANHAECKE, which it's in the episode title, but it's always good to hear it spelled out because it's not spelled quite how you would think, when it's said. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yes.
Joe, thank you so much for being on and sharing your journey and, the ups and downs in it and how you've yes-anded and accepted it, and you're still crushing it. And I'm so grateful of this time. Big hugs. We'll talk soon. And thank you for listening to another great episode of Improvly Speaking. I really enjoyed this episode with Joe. It was different from probably the usual follow-ups and check-in episodes that I've had. I think Joe might be the third guest I've had on as a follow-up or part 2 check-in type of episode. And again, I really enjoy them to see what's going on. And it's crazy what can happen in 2.5 years, 3 years. A lot can change. And while that sounds scary and intimidating, it's also really fun. For me, I got pregnant, I think November 2023, and then had my baby July 2024. And so I've been on this motherhood journey and change in my life, and it's been such a blessing and also the hardest thing I've ever done. Oh my gosh. It's crazy. And then we moved across the country, and then I've now had the opportunity to go full-time in my business. And so I just honor all the changes that have come up, all of the uncertainty that we've dealt with, that we're all dealing with. And I really appreciate Joe coming on and saying, hey, I tried a thing and it didn't unfold the way I expected it or wanted to, and I still consider it a success. It's a success that I tried, and it's a success that I got to learn all of these new skills, and I got to meet all of these cool new people, and let's see what comes up from here. And I think that's really powerful to admit. I wanted to share, too, that Joe reached out to me in the summer last year, so around June 2025, we just met to chat and connect over Zoom. He was on summer break from school and he had some time, and it's like, yeah, let's check in. Let's see how it's going. And I shared this with him in the beginning, but I have my cute little Pod Mom Life notebook, and I sell these, and I like to use them myself for all of my business and podcast notes. And I was just remarking to him that he's the first page in the book. I have the title page, and then the next first page is Joe. So he started off my Pod Mom Life notebook. And I recently, like this week, finished the notebook. I have notes of all these connections and meetings with people and ideas and brainstorming and things I want to do. It's not the most organized system, I'll admit, but I use this notebook as a way to just collect thoughts and stay in the moment in my meetings. I know that we can use AI and we can use Google Documents or Word documents to kind of chat or to keep up with notes from our meetings and stuff. And that's probably the more organized way of doing it. But for me, writing it down still allows me to be present. And I just like the act of writing it down. And anyway, so I just love that piece, though. Joe and I talked in June last year, and he started off this notebook. And I was looking at what we said in our talk. And so in this talk, I was moving, and there was a lot of uncertainty there. And I just, from my notes, it says, first intention, more improv in the world, and none of us have it figured out. And he was talking about classroom management and how he uses improv. And at the end, he mentioned like, hey, I would love to come on the podcast again and chat with you and we can do an update. And I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, let's do it. And then it didn't work out during winter break because I was out of town a lot. And so we got to do it on his spring break week. So he wasn't teaching this week in March. And so we were able to do the podcast episode chat. And I remember, I'm going to admit, I was a little surprised that he offered that because I was like, well, you're not doing your business anymore. So I was like, what angle can we do? And he's like, well, we can talk about improv and education. We can talk about improv and parenting, talk about trauma-informed response in the classroom and how improv can help with that. Also, we were laughing about this on the back end, and this was funny to us, so I feel like I have to share. But he sent me some topics that we could talk about, and one of them was just a dash, and it was trying to start an AI biz. And so when I was doing my notes to prep for this, I put in there, I said, trying to start an AI biz and accepting the time to pivot and change seasons. And I was like, tell me more about this, that we could talk about. And in the notes, I put, I am a technology laggard. So I have some thoughts and concerns about AI if we want to get into that. And Joe wrote a comment like, oh, we have to laugh about this, which we did, because he was not saying AI as artificial intelligence. He was saying AI as applied improv. So trying to start an applied improv biz. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. And I know the term AI as applied improv too, but now we're so conditioned that we see AI, we immediately think artificial intelligence. And I was like, that's really interesting that Joe is going into AI from teaching to artificial intelligence. And he's like, no. Applied improv biz. So we had a good hearty laugh about that before we hit the record button today. Starting an AI biz can mean artificial intelligence and applied improv. And I have a lot of thoughts and opinions about AI, artificial intelligence, and I come at it from a very technology laggard perspective. I am not the first person to take on new technology. I'm always a little hesitant. And I'm just a little hesitant on, yes, it's making our tasks easier, but at what cost? At what cost of our brains, at cost of being a real person and responding as a real person. So I'm just hesitant, and I'll leave it there because I'm sure we'll talk about this more in other episodes as AI becomes more of a thing. But for me, I am going to take the approach that as AI becomes more dominant, people are going to value connection and realness even more. I hope this. I sincerely hope this. And so that's what I bring as a speaker. I'm bringing myself as I am. Doesn't mean I didn't prepare or anything, but as I am for the day, as I'm showing up, I'm here, I'm being real with you, I'm being vulnerable, and I want to inspire and infuse connection and engagement into the room. And that's all I can do as a speaker and facilitator. And that's what I want to see more of, too, in this very artificial intelligence world. It is funny that artificial intelligence and applied improv, they're both AI and they're both very different, kind of opposites to each other, right? Like artificial intelligence, very much a learning-based model, right? And then, designed to make things faster and easier and generic, very generic. Oh my God. Ugh. And then AI is very like connection-based and present and focused in the moment and playful and real. So it's funny the differences there. And that was a fun, happy accident that we had that we laughed about before this. Really enjoyed this one with Joe, and I admire his vulnerability to show up today and give us an update. I have so much respect for him being in education and teaching high school students. That by far has to be one of the hardest jobs out there. Education as a whole is one of the hardest jobs, and it's so undervalued in terms of pay. Teachers just do not get paid what they deserve. Daycare workers do not get paid what they deserve. They're educating our kids and they're helping our kids learn and grow. And yet we will not fund the schools enough to give them proper payment. And it's so frustrating. And again, that's an episode for another time too. But I have so much respect for Joe. And I can tell that his students are getting so much value and learning so much from his classes. And that's everything. Honestly, there's so much we want to do in life. And, we want to achieve all these things and be successful in all of this. And if you can just step away from the expectations and the success and whatever you deem as successful, and probably some financial element is tied to success. If you can make a difference in people's lives, and especially young people's lives, that has a bigger return on investment, a bigger value on investment, however you want to classify it, because you have made a difference in someone's life. Now they can go forth and be themselves and do what they want to do. And they may credit you as someone who helped, they may not, because they don't realize it. But either way, you've helped someone be better and do better. And the more that we can inspire people, the more that we can help people to be better and do better, the better this world can be. And so that is all the difference there. I was going to say that I don't really have a call to action question for you here at the end, but actually I thought of one for you. And that is on the terms of success and failure. And what is something that you have deemed as maybe a failure, or something that you didn't get right or it didn't go as planned and you had to move on and do something else? And maybe that something else actually lit you up and served the purpose. What came after that failure? From your experience and previous experiences where you have labeled something as failure or didn't go well, it didn't go right, what good came out of that? And so I love the reframing of it's not a failure. You tried, you went for it, you learned so much from it. What have you learned from mistakes and things that didn't go as planned? I think that's a very deep question, and it might involve having to remove feelings of guilt or shame and plenty of other feelings tied to it, resentment, whatever it may be that might be tied to those memories and experiences where things didn't go as planned. But I think there's so much value in the space in between. Instead of labeling something as good and bad, or pass or fail, right and wrong, there's always something in between where it's like, oh yeah, I did learn this. I learned so many skills from this experience that I can now take with me. And for Joe, those improv skills, which he's had for a very long time, but now seeing how they apply to life and teaching, he is now using in his second round as a teacher, and it has made him a better teacher. So that's a win right there for sure. Let me know if anything came up for you in this episode. Let me know if anything resonated with you. I love hearing from you. I love hearing what sticks out in your mind, what has motivated you. Maybe you're going on your own journey, and I would just love to be in your corner cheering you on. You can reach out to me on Instagram at Improvly Speaking. On LinkedIn, I'm at Dayna Gowan. And my website is Improvly, that's improv, speaking.com. I have an events tab on my website that has been blank for a little bit, and I need to add some more events on there, I'm realizing. And no, the answer is not to remove that page. The answer is to add more events that I'm doing. So I will work on that. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the Improvly Speaking podcast. I'm so grateful that you're here and on this journey with me. I want to remind you to say yes and go out and flex your creative thinking. I'll talk to you next time.